Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today's story is a deep one, a tale of family secrets, heartbreaking betrayal, and the long, hard road to ultimate justice. Stick around. My name is Elias. For as long as I can remember, I lived in the shadow of my twin brother, Sebastian. This isn't some metaphorical, angsty teen poetry. It was a tangible, daily reality, as concrete as the walls of the house I was never truly welcome in. My parents, Richard and Diana, didn't just prefer Sebastian, they built their entire universe around him, and I was the accidental debris floating on the outskirts, a constant, inconvenient reminder of a package deal they never wanted. They were shockingly transparent about it. I have a core memory, sharp and painful as a shard of glass, from when I was about 8 years old. We were assembling a model rocket, a complicated kit Sebastian had received for his birthday. I reached for a piece, my small fingers eager to help. "Don't touch that, Elias," my father's voice boomed, snatching the piece from me. "You'll just get your fingerprints all over it and ruin the glue. Sebastian knows what he's doing." I remember shrinking back, watching as Sebastian, with a smug little smile, took the piece. He didn't know what he was doing any more than I did, but he had the privilege of learning by doing, while my role was to observe and be silent. Sebastian's room was a shrine to indulgence. It was painted his favorite color, navy blue, and was stocked with the latest video game consoles, a telescope, and a wardrobe that looked like it was curated by a personal stylist. My room was the former linen closet at the end of the hall. It barely fit a narrow cot and a small chest of drawers. The walls were bare except for a single dusty shelf. The air always carried the faint, sweet smell of fabric softener from the towels stored below, a scent I still associate with loneliness. School offered no respite. Parent-teacher conferences were a masterclass in neglect. They would listen with rapt attention to Sebastian's teachers talk about his social prowess and creative thinking, even when his grades were mediocre. When they finally drifted over to my teacher, my straight-A report card, a desperate, pathetic attempt to win a shred of their approval, would get a dismissive glance. "Good, good, keep it up, son," my father would mutter, already turning away. "Sebastian, Mrs. Higgins says you have a real gift for group projects." The message was clear. My achievements were expected. Sebastian's were celebrated. The material things were one thing. The hand-me-down clothes from older cousins that never quite fit. The single, practical gift at Christmas while Sebastian tore through a mountain of toys. But it was the emotional deprivation that carved the deepest wounds. Mealtimes were a ritual of hierarchy. Sebastian always got the choicest cut of meat, the largest portion, the first serving. If I ever dared to look disappointed, my mother would fix me with a withering gaze. "Elias, be grateful you have food on your plate at all. Some children aren't so lucky." She made me feel like a charity case in my own home. The one beacon of light in my life was my maternal grandfather, Walter. He was a retired history professor, a man with a kind, wrinkled face and eyes that truly saw you. Sundays with him were sacred. We'd escape to his cluttered, book-filled study or work in his small garden, and he'd talk to me about ancient civilizations, about integrity, about the quiet strength of character. "You are not an echo, Elias," he'd tell me, his voice firm and gentle. "You are a voice all your own. Don't let anyone, especially those who are supposed to love you, convince you otherwise." He was the only person who made me feel valued. When he fell ill with pancreatic cancer, the family's cruelty reached a new low. They began taking only Sebastian to visit him, claiming the hospital environment was too stressful for me and that I needed to help more around the house. It was a transparent lie. I defied them. I'd bike to the hospital after dark and sit with him, holding his frail hand while he slept. During his lucid moments, he'd squeeze my hand, his eyes full of a worried love. "They've hidden it, Elias," he whispered to me during one of my last visits, his voice a papery thin rasp. "The truth is in the cedar box. Remember the cedar box. It's all for you. Promise me you'll remember." I promised, though I didn't fully understand. I thought he was delirious. At his funeral, my family formed a perfect, mournful triangle at the front of the church. Richard, Diana, and Sebastian, the grieving inner circle. I was relegated to the back pew, a distant relative in every sense but blood. The loneliness was a physical ache. After his death, the last vestiges of pretense vanished. I became a ghost in the house. I'd sit at the dinner table, and they'd have entire conversations as if I weren't there. Family vacations were planned around Sebastian's interests, and I was merely luggage that occasionally needed feeding. The resentment festered, but I learned to internalize it, to make myself small and silent. It was easier that way. I turned 16, marking the days on a mental calendar until I could legally escape. But Sebastian, as always, set the timeline for our lives. Sebastian got his girlfriend Chloe pregnant. He was 16, she was 15. I braced for the explosion, for the parental disappointment I would surely have faced. Instead, I witnessed something surreal. My parents were ecstatic. My mother cried tears of joy. My father clapped Sebastian on the back, boasting about carrying on the family name. They treated it like a miraculous event, not a teenage crisis. They orchestrated a rushed, hushed-up wedding. It was a bizarre, joyful affair. I was an afterthought, a prop, told to wear a suit and stand in the back. No one asked my opinion. My role was to be present but invisible. 2 weeks later, the real hammer fell. I was summoned to the living room. My mother wore that particular smile she reserved for delivering bad news she thought she could sugarcoat. "Elias, honey, with the baby coming, we all need to think about space," she began, her voice sickly sweet. "The nursery, well, we've decided your room makes the most sense. It's right next to ours, perfect for the baby." The words didn't land at first. They just hung in the air, nonsensical. "My room?" I finally managed to say. "Where am I supposed to go?" My father stepped in, his tone impatient. "You're nearly a man. It's time you started acting like one. You'll figure it out. You should be grateful we've provided for you as long as we have." The sheer audacity stole my breath. Figure it out? I'm 16. I'm in school. Where exactly should I go? "Don't be dramatic," my mother chided. "We're doing this for your brother. He needs our support. This is what family does." That night, I packed a single duffel bag. My life condensed into a few pairs of jeans, some t-shirts, my school books, and the small, beautifully carved wooden eagle my grandfather had made for me. I took one last look around my tiny closet room, the only space that had ever been mine, and felt a profound sense of loss. I couldn't just disappear, so I did the only thing I could think of. I dragged our old, mildewy camping tent out of the garage and pitched it in the far corner of the backyard, hidden behind a large weeping willow. My new home was a nylon dome smelling of damp earth and despair. The nights were brutally cold. I'd layer every piece of clothing I owned, my breath pluming in the icy air inside the tent. I tried to keep up with schoolwork by flashlight, but my grades began a steep decline. How could I concentrate on calculus when I was shivering uncontrollably and my stomach growled with a hollow emptiness? The worst part was the proximity. I could hear them through the kitchen window, the clatter of dishes, the laughter, the excited planning for the new baby. I was a ghost haunting my own life, watching the living from the cold outside. I'd sneak in to scavenge leftovers, feeling like a thief in my own home. I took any odd job I could find, mowing lawns, raking leaves, shoveling snow. The money was meager, but it bought me cheap sandwiches and a sliver of dignity. I knew if my grandfather were alive, he would have never allowed this. But he was gone, and I was utterly alone. One particularly frigid evening, as I lay in the tent, listening to the wind howl, a resolve, cold and hard as iron, settled in my chest. They had discarded me. They saw me as nothing. Fine. I would become something without them. I would survive, and then I would thrive, and I would never, ever need them again. The turning point came a week later. Half frozen and desperate, I found myself standing outside the Rising Roll, a small independent bakery on the outskirts of town. The warmth and the smell of yeast and sugar wafting from the vents was a siren's call. The owner, a man in his late 60s named Henry, came out to hose down the sidewalk. He had a face like well-worn leather and eyes that missed nothing. He took one look at me, pale, shivering, my clothes hanging off me, and stopped his work. "You look like you're about to fall over, kid," he grunted, not unkindly. I just nodded, my teeth chattering. "You hungry?" Another nod. He jerked his head toward the door. "Come on. I've got day-old bagels that'll break your teeth, but they'll fill your stomach." That bagel, hard as a rock, was the best thing I ever tasted. As I ate, Henry watched me. "You got a place to stay?" he asked. I shook my head, too ashamed to speak. "You looking for work?" This time my yes was immediate and desperate. Henry hired me on the spot for cash. The work was back-breaking. My day started at 3:30 a.m. I'd haul 50-pound sacks of flour, scrub massive industrial mixing bowls until my arms screamed, and mop floors caked in hardened dough. But it was warm, and Henry, though gruff, was fair. At the end of each shift, he'd pay me in cash and send me off with a loaf of bread or a bag of pastries that hadn't sold. After a few weeks, he led me up a narrow, creaking staircase to a small room above the bakery. It was tiny, with a single bed, a sink, and a window that looked out onto a brick wall. "Storage," he muttered. "Roof is solid. It's yours if you want it. Rent comes out of your pay." It wasn't much, but it was a palace. It was mine. I had a door I could lock. I was safe. I became a model employee. I learned the trade with a voracious hunger. Henry taught me how to knead dough to the perfect consistency, how to temper chocolate, how to tell when a sourdough is properly proofed by tapping its bottom. Over time, his gruff exterior softened. He'd been a runaway himself once, and he saw a reflection of his younger self in my struggle. I earned my GED, then enrolled in night classes at the community college studying business and accounting. The anger and hurt from my family's rejection were a potent fuel, but so was the quiet, steadfast decency of Henry. He became the father figure I never had. For 5 years, I lived a monastic existence. Work, school, study, sleep. I saved every single penny. The goal was a down payment on a house. It was my white whale, my symbol of ultimate independence and security. And then I did it. I found it. A modest but solid 3-bedroom bungalow on a quiet street. It needed work, new paint, updated wiring, a lot of TLC, but it had good bones in a small, sunny backyard. The day I signed the papers and held the keys in my hand, I stood in the empty living room and wept. They were tears of pride, of exhaustion, and of a grief finally acknowledged. I had done it, entirely, on my own. I spent months slowly making it my own. I painted walls, sanded floors, learned basic plumbing from online videos. Every swing of a hammer, every brush stroke was a reaffirmation of my own capability. I bought furniture from thrift stores and refurbished it. It was coming together, piece by piece, into a home. My home. I'd been living there for about 6 months, finally feeling a sense of peace I'd never known, when my doorbell rang on a lazy Sunday afternoon. I opened the door, and my world tilted on its axis. There they stood, Richard, Diana, Sebastian, his wife Chloe, and their 3 small children. They were smiling broadly, surrounded by suitcases and cardboard boxes, as if they had arrived for a long-planned family reunion. "Elias," my mother chirped, her voice dripping with a false coin sweetness. "Surprise! We heard about your wonderful new house. We're just so incredibly proud of you." I stood frozen, my hand gripping the doorframe, my blood running cold. Sebastian pushed past me, his eyes scanning the living room with an appraising, entitled gleam. "Nice digs, brother. Really nice. Lots of room for the kids to run around." My father cleared his throat, adopting his familiar tone of paternal authority. "Son, with the housing market being what it is and Sebastian's family needed more space, we've decided it's time for a fresh start. We're all moving in. Families stick together." The audacity was so monumental, it was almost impressive. 2 decades of neglect, of emotional abuse, of being thrown out like garbage, all culminated in this breathtaking display of entitlement on my porch. "No," I said, my voice low and surprisingly steady. Their smiles faltered. "What do you mean, no?" my mother asked, her smile tightening into a grimace. "Elias, don't be difficult. We're your family." "You stopped being my family the night you gave my bedroom to a baby and made me sleep in a tent. You are not moving in. You are not welcome here." My father's face flushed a dangerous shade of purple. "After everything we'd done for you, the roof we put over your head, the food we put on your table, this is how you show gratitude?" "You mean the roof I slept in on a tent? The leftovers I scavenged from your fridge?" I shot back, the years of pent-up fury giving my words a sharp edge. "Get off my property." The confrontation escalated into a screaming match on my pristine lawn. They called me selfish, ungrateful, a monster. Sebastian accused me of hoarding my success to spite them. They invoked family, obligation, blood, but their words had lost all power over me. Finally, after I took out my phone and threatened to call the police, they retreated, piling into their cars and speeding away, shouting promises that this wasn't over. I leaned against my closed door, my heart hammering against my ribs. I had won the skirmish, but a cold dread settled in my stomach. I knew them. They wouldn't accept defeat. The first salvo arrived a month later, an official-looking letter from a law firm. With trembling hands, I opened it. It was a notice of a civil lawsuit. Sebastian was suing me, claiming a constructive trust on my property. The claim was blatantly fictional. He alleged that our grandfather had intended his estate to be split equally between us and that I had unduly influenced him and fraudulently taken possession of assets that rightfully belonged to both twins. He demanded half the value of my house. I was reeling. It was a complete lie, but it was a clever one, designed to sound plausible to a judge who didn't know our history. I immediately hired a lawyer, a sharp, incisive woman named Evelyn Reed. "It's a nuisance suit," she said, tapping the paper with a perfectly manicured nail. "They have no evidence because there is none. They're banking on you being intimidated, on you settling to avoid a long, expensive court battle. It's a classic bullying tactic." I refused to be bullied. I didn't work this hard to be scared out of what's mine. We fight. We fight them on everything. The lawsuit dragged on for months. My family launched a vicious smear campaign telling extended family and old friends that I was a greedy, manipulative son who had stolen from his own twin. I received angry emails and messages from people I hadn't spoken to in years. The stress was immense, a constant grinding pressure. It was during the discovery process, the mandatory exchange of information, that Evelyn called me into her office with a grim expression. "Elias," she said, gesturing for me to sit, "we've been playing defense, protecting your assets. I think it's time we went on the offensive. I want to dig into their finances. Something about their financial history doesn't add up. Their lifestyle never quite matched their reported income." I signed the necessary paperwork, a knot of anxiety and anticipation tightening in my chest. Weeks later, Evelyn called me back. Her voice was electric with controlled excitement. "Elias, you need to come to the office now. You need to see this." I raced over. She spread a series of bank statements, trust documents, and property records across her massive desk. "Your grandfather, Walter, was a very wealthy man. When he died, he left a substantial inheritance. The will was explicit and uncontestable. The entire estate was to be held in a blind trust for one person. You. It was to be released to you in stages, a portion when you were 18, a larger portion at 21, and the remainder at 25. Your parents were the sole trustees. The room seemed to swim. I felt dizzy. I never knew. They never told me. I know, Evelyn said softly, her eyes full of a righteous fury. Look here. She pointed to the documents. Over the years, they had systematically pillaged the trust. They'd forged my signature on countless documents. They used my money for the down payment on their current house, Sebastian's extravagant wedding and 2-month European honeymoon, a brand new sports car for Sebastian's 18th birthday, bailing out his failed, ill-conceived tech startup twice, paying off their own substantial credit card debt. They had been living a life of luxury funded by my future, while I was sleeping in a tent and working my fingers to the bone in a bakery. The money my grandfather had left to secure my education and my future had been stolen to underwrite their golden child's every failure. The betrayal was so profound, so vicious, it transcended anger. It was a cold, hollow void. I thought of my grandfather's last words, "The truth is in the cedar box." The cedar box was where he kept his important papers. They had hidden it, and the truth, from me. Evelyn looked at me, her expression fierce. We amend our countersuit. This is no longer just about defending your house. This is about grand theft, fraud, and breach of fiduciary duty. We're going to take everything back. The day of the hearing arrived. My family swaggered into the courtroom, confident and smirking, their lawyer looking smug. They believed their lie was about to pay off. Their faces fell when they saw the new, towering stacks of documents on our table. Evelyn was a maestro of destruction. She methodically, ruthlessly laid out the evidence. She presented the will, the trust documents, the bank statements showing the transfers into my parents' accounts, the mortgage for their house, the receipts for Sebastian's car, the financial records of his failed business. She eviscerated my father on the stand. So, Mr. Vance, can you explain to the court how withdrawals from your son Elias's trust fund correlate with this $45,000 payment for a Nissan Z-Series sports car registered to Sebastian? My father spluttered, his face turning crimson. That was a family investment. An investment in a sports car? Evelyn asked, her voice dripping with sarcasm. And this $80,000 payment to Vertex Tech, Sebastian's failed startup, another family investment made with Elias's money without his knowledge? We intended to pay it back. Can you show the court any loan documentation, any communication, any